Hey there, you're looking kind of cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out all my other socials. Enjoy. The old floorboard creaked, betraying Braden's presence in Gia's bedroom. He froze, heart pounding, one foot raised mid-step as he listened intently for any sign that his best friend had returned home early. After a moment of tense silence, he let out a shaky breath and continued toward the closet. Braden's fingers trembled as he reached for the closet door. He hesitated, guilt and shame warring with an overwhelming desire that had haunted him for years. With a soft groan of resignation, he slid the door open and gazed longingly at the array of feminine clothing before him. Silky blouses, flowing skirts, and delicate dresses in a rainbow of colors filled the space. Braden reached out, running his fingertips reverently over the soft fabrics. He plucked a powder blue sundress from its hanger, holding it up to his chest as he stared at his reflection in the full-length mirror on the closet door. The dress was simple but beautiful, with thin straps and a fitted bodice that flared out into a knee-length skirt. Braden imagined how it would feel to wear it, the light fabric brushing against his skin, the skirt swishing around his legs as he walked. His heart ached with longing. Before he could talk himself out of it, Braden stripped down to his underwear and carefully stepped into the dress. He pulled it up, slipping his arms through the straps, and reached back to zip it up. The fit wasn't perfect. The dress was a bit loose in the chest and tight across his broader shoulders. But as Braden stared at his reflection, he felt a sense of rightness that brought tears to his eyes. For the first time in his life, the person staring back at him in the mirror looked the way he felt inside. Braden ran his hands down the sides of the dress, smoothing the fabric and marveling at how natural it felt. He twirled experimentally, watching the skirt flare out around him. A choked sob escaped his throat as the magnitude of the moment hit him. This wasn't just about wearing women's clothing. It was about finally allowing himself to acknowledge the truth he'd been hiding for so long. Braden didn't just want to wear dresses and skirts. He wanted to be a woman, to live as his true self in a body that matched how he felt inside. Lost in the emotional whirlwind of his revelation, Braden didn't hear the front door open or the sound of footsteps approaching the bedroom. It wasn't until he caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror that he realized he wasn't alone. Gia stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock as she took in the scene before her. Braden in her dress, tears streaming down his face, looking simultaneously more vulnerable and more at peace than she'd ever seen him. "Braden?" Gia's voice was barely above a whisper. "What's going on?" Panic seized Braden's chest. He stumbled backward, arms wrapping protectively around himself as he searched desperately for words to explain. "Gia, I'm so sorry. I wasn't..." He trailed off, unable to form a coherent sentence as shame and fear overwhelmed him. Gia stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. Her expression was unreadable as she approached her friend. "Braden," she said gently, "talk to me, please." The kindness in her voice broke something inside Braden. He sank to the floor, burying his face in his hands as sobs racked his body. "I'm sorry," he choked out between gasps. "I'm so sorry. I know this is wrong. I know I shouldn't. But I can't help it. I've tried so hard to fight it, but I can't anymore." Gia knelt beside him, hesitating for a moment before placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Fight what, Braden? What's going on?" Braden took a shuddering breath, forcing himself to meet Gia's gaze. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no going back. I think I'm transgender," he whispered. "No, that's not right. I know I am. I've known for years, but I've been too scared to admit it, even to myself." He braced himself for disgust or anger, but Gia's expression remained open and concerned. Encouraged by her silence, Braden continued, the words pouring out of him in a desperate rush. "I've always felt different, like I was living in the wrong body. When I look in the mirror, the person I see doesn't match who I am inside. I've tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was just a phase or confusion, but it's not. I'm a woman, Gia. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. I'm a woman trapped in a man's body, and I don't know what to do. Brayden's voice broke on the last word, and he looked away, unable to bear the weight of Gia's gaze any longer. He waited for the inevitable rejection, for her to tell him he was sick or perverted. Instead, he felt Gia's arms wrap around him, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Oh, Brayden," she murmured. "I had no idea you were carrying this burden. I'm so sorry you've been struggling alone for so long." Brayden stiffened in surprise before melting into the hug, clinging to Gia as if she were a lifeline. You don't hate me?" he asked in a small voice. Gia pulled back, cupping Brayden's face in her hands and looking him directly in the eye. "Of course I don't hate you. You're my best friend. Nothing could ever change that, especially not you being honest about who you really are." Relief washed over Brayden, so intense it left him lightheaded. He sagged against Gia, overwhelmed by the acceptance he'd never dared to hope for. "I was so afraid," he admitted. "I thought if anyone found out, I'd lose everything. My friends, my family, my whole life." "You haven't lost me," Gia assured him firmly. "And you won't. I'm here for you, no matter what. We'll figure this out together, okay?" Brayden nodded, wiping at his tears with the back of his hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." They sat in silence for a few moments, Gia rubbing soothing circles on Brayden's back as he collected himself. Finally, Gia spoke again, her voice hesitant but determined. "So, if you're a woman, does that mean you want to transition, like medically and socially?" Brayden took a deep breath, considering the question. It was something he'd thought about countless times, but always pushed aside as an impossible dream. Now, with Gia's support, it suddenly felt within reach. I think so," he said slowly. "I mean, yes. I do. I want to live as my true self. I'm just not sure where to start." Gia squeezed his hand encouragingly. "We'll research together. There are doctors who specialize in transgender healthcare, support groups, online resources. We'll find all the information we can, and I'll be with you every step of the way." Tears welled up in Brayden's eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude and hope. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, "for understanding, for accepting me. It means more than I can ever express." "You don't have to thank me," Gia replied with a soft smile. "That's what friends are for. Now, let's get you cleaned up, and then we can start making a plan. Oh, and Brayden, that dress looks beautiful on you." Brayden blushed, a shy smile spreading across his face. "Really?" "Really," Gia confirmed. In fact, she stood up and went to her closet, rifling through the hangers before pulling out a few items. "Why don't you try these on, if you're comfortable, of course? We can see what styles you like, what fits well. It might help you feel more like yourself." Brayden's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "I'd love that," he said softly. "Thank you, Gia, for everything." As Brayden tried on different outfits, twirling in front of the mirror and reveling in the joy of finally expressing his true self, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The road ahead would be challenging, he knew, but with Gia by his side, he finally felt ready to face it. Over the next few weeks, Brayden and Gia threw themselves into research. They spent hours poring over websites, watching videos from transgender YouTubers, and reading personal accounts of transition. Brayden felt overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information, but Gia helped him sort through it all, making lists and taking notes. "Okay," Gia said one afternoon, tapping her pen against her notebook. "So we've got the basics covered. You'll need to find a therapist who specializes in gender identity issues. They can help you work through your feelings and provide a letter for hormone therapy if that's something you want to pursue." Brayden nodded, his stomach fluttering with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "I definitely want to start hormones," he said. "The idea of my body becoming more feminine, it feels right. Like it's what should have happened all along." Gia smiled encouragingly. "Then that's what we'll focus on. We'll find you a good therapist, and an endocrinologist who has experience with transgender patients. Oh, and we should probably start thinking about names. Have you given any thought to what you'd like to be called? Brayden bit his lip, a blush creeping up his cheeks. I've had a name in mind for a while, he admitted, but it feels weird to say it out loud. Take your time, Gia said gently. There's no rush. When you're ready to share it, I'm here to listen. Brayden took a deep breath, steeling himself. Brianna, he said softly. I'd like to be called Brianna. Gia's face lit up. Brianna, she repeated. It's beautiful. It suits you perfectly. Hearing the name spoken aloud sent a thrill through Brayden. No, through Brianna. She felt tears pricking at her eyes and blinked them away. You really think so? Absolutely, Gia assured her. Do you want me to start using it and female pronouns? Brianna hesitated, torn between her desire to embrace her true identity and her fear of the outside world. Maybe just when we're alone for now, she said tentatively. I'm not ready to come out to everyone yet. Of course, Gia said. Whatever makes you comfortable. This is your journey, Brianna. We'll take it at your pace. The use of her chosen name sent a warm glow through Brianna's chest. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen and understood. As the days passed, Brianna grew more confident in her identity. She began wearing feminine clothing around Gia's apartment, reveling in the freedom to express herself. Gia taught her how to apply makeup, laughing good-naturedly at Brianna's initial clumsy attempts with eyeliner. You'll get the hang of it, Gia assured her, gently correcting Brianna's technique. It just takes practice. And hey, you should see some of my early attempts. I looked like a raccoon for weeks. Brianna giggled, studying her reflection in the mirror. Even with the imperfect makeup application, she felt more like herself than ever before. Thank you for doing this, she said softly, for helping me become who I really am. Gia squeezed her shoulder. You've always been who you really are, Brianna. You're just letting the world see it now, and I'm honored to be part of that process. As Brianna grew more comfortable in her identity, she began to consider the next steps in her transition. With Gia's support, she made an appointment with a gender therapist, Dr. Melissa Carter. The day of the appointment arrived, and Brianna found herself pacing nervously in Gia's living room, second-guessing her decision. What if she doesn't believe me? Brianna fretted. What if she thinks I'm not trans enough, or that I'm just confused? Gia caught Brianna's hands, stilling her anxious movement. Hey, look at me, she said firmly. You know who you are. No one can take that away from you. Dr. Carter's job is to help you, not to judge you, and if for some reason she's not a good fit, we'll find someone else, okay? Brianna took a deep breath, drawing strength from her friend's unwavering support. Okay, she said. I can do this. The therapy session was both more difficult and more liberating than Brianna had anticipated. Dr. Carter was kind and professional, asking thoughtful questions about Brianna's experiences and feelings. For the first time, Brianna was able to articulate the dysphoria she'd felt for so long, the disconnect between her inner self and her outer appearance. As she spoke, Brianna felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The shame and secrecy that had burdened her for years began to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of self-acceptance and hope for the future. At the end of the session, Dr. Carter smiled warmly at Brianna. Thank you for sharing your story with me, Brianna. I want you to know that what you're feeling is valid. Gender dysphoria is a real and challenging experience, but it's not something you have to face alone. I'm here to support you as you navigate your transition, whatever that looks like for you. Brianna left the office feeling lighter than she had in years. As she climbed into Gia's car, her friend looked at her expectantly. How did it go? It was amazing, Brianna said, her voice filled with wonder. She listened to me, Gia. She understood, and she wants to help me start hormone therapy if that's what I decide I want. Gia pulled her into a tight hug. I'm so proud of you, Brianna. You're incredibly brave, you know that? Brianna shook her head, embarrassed by the praise. I don't feel brave. I'm terrified most of the time. That's exactly what makes you brave, Gia insisted. You're facing your fears and being true to yourself despite how scary it is. That's real courage. As they drove home, Brianna stared out the window, lost in thought. The world looked different somehow, full of possibilities she'd never allowed herself to consider before. For the first time in her life, she could imagine a future where she was truly happy, truly herself. The next few months were a whirlwind of appointments, research, and preparations. Brianna continued her therapy sessions, working through years of repressed emotions and internalized transphobia. With Dr. Carter's help, she began to build a stronger sense of self and develop coping strategies for the challenges ahead. After careful consideration and discussion with both Dr. Carter and an endocrinologist, Brianna decided to start hormone replacement therapy. The day she took her first dose of estrogen was both terrifying and exhilarating. Gia was there with her, holding her hand as she swallowed the tiny pill that would begin to align her body with her true gender. "How do you feel?" Gia asked, watching her friend closely. Brianna considered the question. "Scared," she admitted. "Excited? Hopeful? It's hard to believe this is really happening." "It is happening," Gia assured her. "You're doing it, Brianna. You're becoming who you were always meant to be." As the hormones began to take effect, Brianna marveled at the subtle changes in her body. Her skin softened, her facial features became slightly more feminine, and she noticed the beginnings of breast development. Each change, no matter how small, felt like a victory. But the physical changes were only part of the journey. Brianna also had to navigate the complex process of coming out to friends and family. She started with a small circle of trusted friends, inviting them over to Gia's apartment one evening. Brianna's hands shook as she faced the small group gathered in the living room. Gia sat beside her, a steady, reassuring presence. "Thank you all for coming," Brianna began, her voice trembling slightly. I have something important to tell you." She took a deep breath, drawing strength from Gia's encouraging smile. "I'm transgender," she said, the words still feeling strange on her tongue. "I'm a woman, and I've started transitioning. My name is Brianna now, and I use she, her pronouns." The room was silent for a moment, and Brianna felt her heart pounding in her chest. Then, one by one, her friends responded with love and support. There were hugs, tears, and promises of allegiance. While a few seemed confused or unsure, no one reacted with hostility or rejection. As the evening wore on and her friends peppered her with questions about her journey, Brianna felt a sense of community she'd never experienced before. These people saw her, the real her, and accepted her without hesitation. Coming out to her family proved to be more challenging. Brianna's parents struggled to understand at first, their reactions a mix of confusion, concern, and disbelief. There were difficult conversations, tears, and moments when Brianna feared she might lose them entirely. But slowly, with patience and education, they began to come around. Brianna's mother was the first to use her new name and pronouns consistently, stumbling at times, but always trying. Her father took longer to adjust, but his love for his child ultimately overcame his initial resistance. "I may not understand everything," he told Brianna one evening, his voice gruff with emotion, "but I know I love you. You're my child no matter what. If this is what you need to be happy, then I support you." Brianna broke down in tears, embracing her father tightly. It wasn't perfect, she knew. There would be more challenges ahead, more explanations needed, more adjustments to be made. But in that moment, surrounded by the love of her family and friends, Brianna felt a sense of peace she'd never known before. As the months passed, Brianna's transition continued. She legally changed her name and gender marker, a process that was bureaucratically frustrating but ultimately empowering. The first time she saw her true name on an official document, she cried tears of joy. She began to present as female full-time, navigating the complexities of women's fashion and the often judgmental stares of strangers. There were difficult days when dysphoria hit hard, when the journey seemed impossibly long, but there were also moments of pure elation, like the first time a stranger referred to her as ma'am without hesitation. Through it all, Gia remained her staunchest supporter. She celebrated every milestone with Brianna, from her first successful cat eye eyeliner to her first date as her true self. When Brianna faced discrimination or struggled with self-doubt, Gia was there with unwavering support and fierce advocacy. 1 year after Brianna had first confessed her truth to Gia, the two friends sat together on the balcony of Gia's apartment, watching the sunset. Brianna wore a flowing sundress, her hair now long enough to style in soft waves around her face. She looked at her reflection in the window, marveling at how far she'd come. "I can't believe it's been a year," Brianna said softly. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you caught me in your closet. Other times, it feels like a lifetime ago." Gia smiled, reaching out to squeeze Brianna's hand. "You've come so far," she said. "I'm in awe of your strength and courage, you know that?" Brianna blushed, still unused to such praise. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You've been my rock through all of this. I don't know how I can ever repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Gia insisted. "Your friendship is more than enough. Seeing you happy, seeing you become your true self, that's all the reward I need." Brianna leaned her head on Gia's shoulder, overcome with gratitude. "I never thought I could have this," she admitted. "A life where I'm truly myself, where I'm accepted and loved for who I am. It still feels like a dream sometimes." "It's not a dream," Gia assured her. "This is your reality now, Brianna. You've worked so hard for it, and you deserve every bit of happiness that comes your way." The warm glow of the setting sun cast a golden hue over Brianna and Gia's faces, emphasizing the joy and contentment in their eyes. Looking at her reflection again, Brianna could see the subtle traces of the boy she once was, but they were fading, overshadowed by the confident, radiant woman she had become. "You know," Brianna said, turning to face Gia, "there's something I want to talk to you about, something I've been thinking about a lot lately." Gia's eyebrows rose slightly, a mixture of curiosity and mischief dancing in her eyes. "Oh yeah? What's that?" Brianna felt her cheeks warm, a familiar blush creeping up her neck. "Well, it's kind of embarrassing." Gia shook her head, her lips curling into a reassuring smile. "Sweetie, after all we've been through, I doubt there's much you could say that would embarrass me." Thanks for watching. The rest won't be viewable on YouTube, so check out Patreon if you want more. I hope you have a wonderful day, my cutie.